Lepo pozdravljeni v našem studiu. V našem studiu smo povabili tudi goste iz Anglije. Rado bi tolmačila svoje strokovne jezika, kako porozumevali, da imamo tukaj angleški jezik, plus še slovenski znakovni jezik. Torej, da bi vas lepo pozdravila.
I would like to welcome you here.
Hello.
Thank you.
Prvo vprašala vas, kdo ste, da se predstavite in kako izhajate.
I'm Sharon Ryan, and this is Fiona Miller.
Hello.
And we both come from Leeds City College, which is a large college for people who are aged 16 and over, and we're based in the north of England, in the city of Leeds.
Kaj vas je pripeljalo tam v Slovenijo?
What brought you here to Slovenia? What is your goal here in Slovenia?
We were hoping, we've come to see the school that Živa works at, because they have a lot of students who are deaf and who are autistic and who have communication problems, and they use a lot of sign, and we were interested to see how that worked.
V Sloveniji ste že nekaj dni in kakšna se vam
You're here for a few
Slovenija?
days. How do you feel about it?
It's such a beautiful country. There are mountains, it's beautiful scenery. Yesterday we went on the bus to Lake Bled, which was just so beautiful, and the weather was lovely. In fact, I think the first 2 days we were here we didn't see any clouds and there was no rain. And coming from England, where it's quite often cloudy and it's quite often rainy, that was really nice.
What I love about the city of Ljubljana is that there's no traffic. It's really quiet, and you just hear people chatting at the cafes. It's lovely, very calm, very tranquil.
Anglija pa nasprotno, ali kako?
In England it is like the opposite from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's noisy, noisy, very noisy. The towns are very noisy. Cars beeping their horns, sirens going off. It's noisy.
Omenili ste, da prihajate iz Lidza. Bi prosila, da predstavite, kje je ta Lid, glede glavno mesto.
Please tell us about Leeds. How far it is from the London, from the capital?
It's
Ooh.
220 miles. I don't know what that is in kilometres.
That's about 300,
300 kilometres.
300, 350 kilometres.
Kakšne so pa razlike v vaši šoli, takšne in v naših na Zahodu?
What are the differences between your school for deaf and this what you've seen here in Slovenia?
Okay. We come from a very big college. It has 45,000 students. They're not all in the same building and they don't all come at the same time, but most of them are hearing. And it's a very, very small proportion of those students that is either hard of hearing or deaf. This year we have about 15 deaf students who use sign language, and about just over 100 students who are hard of hearing. So it's a very small deaf population. The deaf students don't get to meet each other very much because they're all doing different courses, they're in different classes. So if you're deaf and you come to our college, it can sometimes feel quite lonely because you're surrounded by hearing people. So it's very different from the school in Ljubljana, where the students communicate quite well with each other. If a deaf student who uses sign language comes to our college, then they need to have an interpreter with them pretty much all the time. Some students are quite independent and they will go out and get lunch, and they'll go out on their break and they'll get to college fine. But in class they will definitely need an interpreter because there is not the same culture of sign language in the college.
Kako pa je poskrbljeno glede stroškov za tolmačenje?
How is with,
Kdo financira?
who is financing this interpreting in classes?
We get a combination of money from central government and from the local authority. So support for deaf students can be very expensive. It can be a lot higher than the cost of supporting a student who's autistic or dyslexic or something like that. I have one student at the moment whose support costs are about £30,000, which is probably about 40,000 euros, something like that. That's for 1 year to support this student. So it's a lot of money for 1 year. So we get some money from central government and we get some money from the local council.
To pomeni, da to velja za celoletno tolmačenje.
That is
Ni
for the
pomembno
whole year
število
of
tolmačev v razredih.
interpreting?
No.
It's for the whole year.
I have a big sheet that I have to fill out that says exactly how many hours a deaf student will have interpreting and how many hours they will have some language support to help with their English language, and how many hours they will need support if they go to work placement. So I have to fill in all the details of their support. They don't just give us the money. We have to say how we're going to spend it.
Kakšne so pa možnosti za srednješolsko izobraževanje? Kakšen poklic nudite?
The student chooses what they'd like to study. So on one campus they do a lot of catering and hospitality, hair and beauty. At another campus they do horticulture and animal care. At my campus we do childcare, and we have a lot of life skills. So students who need to learn how to go and shop, catch the bus, basic cooking, there's a life skills course for them.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do at Keighley?
We have carpentry and joinery, we have plumbing, we have construction, fabrication and welding, motor vehicle, health and caring services, so it's childcare or looking after older people,
And
sports and public services, which is if people want to go into the police or the fire brigade, they do a public services course. I think that's it.
And you can do some other courses in art and photography. And a lot of IT. Forgot about
Yes,
that. A lot of
IT and business. Mm.
Business studies.
Ne bi prosila, da nam mogoče nazorno predstavite proces šolanja v osnovnih šolah, srednjih šolah, študij.
Can you explain a system in England, like from primary school and then secondary school, of what is your system, educational system?
Go on, Fiona.
When children about 4, they go to a primary school, and then I'm not sure about what happens in schools because I don't have children.
All right, I'll explain then. I'm the one with children. So the law says that from the age of 5 you have to go to school, but some children start before that, but they don't have to go. So from the age of 5 the law says you must go, and so you go to a primary school up until the age of 11, and then when you're 11 you go to the secondary school. And the law has just changed in Britain so that now children have to stay at school until they're 18. Before they had to stay until they were 16, but now it's 18. So they have to be in some kind of education until they're 18. That doesn't mean they stay at the same school. They can come to college, they can come to us, or they can go off and get an apprenticeship, which means they go to work but they come to college as well. So they have to do something until they're 18, and then at 18 people can choose to go to university, or they can carry on with a vocational course, which is the kind of course that we do at Leeds City College.
Kakšne so pa možnosti glede izmenjave delovno prakso? Dijaki, če bi ste izmenjali vaši
I think deaf people need a lot of support, because your sign language is different to our sign language, and your finger spelling is different. So I think if there was an exchange of students, they would need a lot of support. I think as well that in England the deaf culture is, a lot of students who are deaf don't have the opportunity of travelling very far. So I think it would be quite difficult for students, deaf students, to come here, because it's so different.
But having said that there will be difficulties, I think, because education in England, it focuses a lot on people learning subjects, learning English, learning maths, learning things like that, learning French, learning whatever. And sometimes deaf people can be so focused on, deaf children can be so focused on learning the subjects of English and maths and whatever, that sometimes we don't teach deaf children how to be mature, how to become adults. So they would need support if they came over, but I think the difference between Slovene Sign Language and British Sign Language is a lot smaller than the difference between spoken Slovene and spoken English. So there wouldn't be so much of a communication barrier, I think. But in terms of helping deaf students get around and doing things like that, I think they'd need help to do that. In terms of Slovene deaf students coming over to Leeds City College, that would be a fantastic thing to happen. That would be a really good thing to happen. I think we've got such different ways, I think, of educating deaf students, and we've got a lot of similarities, but we've got some different ways as well. And I think to just have that exchange of cultures would be really good.
The students we've met at the school where Jiva works, the deaf students are very mature, and they like talking, communicating with us.
Kako je pa glede vpisa v vašo šolo? Ali imate tudi vi težave s tem, da je vedno manj gluhih vpisanih v
Do you
vašo
have the
šolo?
same problem as we do?
Večinate pa v integrira,
That a lot of students are integrated and you don't have enough deaf children into your schools.
That's right. That's right. It's from what I've seen over the last few days being in Slovenia, a very similar thing is happening in England, and that is that cochlear implants are becoming a lot more widespread. It's still quite unusual for two cochlear implants like it is here. Usually children will have just the one, but because 90% of our deaf children are born to hearing parents, then the parents want their child to be like them, and they want to be able to communicate with their child, and they have a doctor saying to them, we can cure your child, we can stop them being deaf by giving them this cochlear implant. And then quite often they will have the operation for their child. But sometimes, I mean, I know people personally who've had these operations and have switched them off because it's just not working for them, and they think, no, I'm deaf, I can't cope with this, and they will switch it off. But it's a very similar situation in England, that the deaf culture is dying out because there are fewer and fewer deaf people to carry it on.
Are you saying this as for whole England or just for Leeds?
It's
like this situation?
It's for the whole of England, yeah.
Colpa država Anglija poskrbi za gluhe. Ali ti gluhi potem dobijo motivacijo, da nadaljujejo študij?
I think before a lot of deaf people thought, I'm deaf, I will never work, I will never get a job. And I think now that's changing a bit, and I think now a lot of deaf students who come to our college, they might not think about going to university. And I think the big thing that decides whether a deaf person goes to university or not is their ability to read and write. I think that's the one big thing. I think if a deaf person can learn to read and write English, then they will go on to university. But if they can't manage that, if they're not given the opportunity to do that, then they will perhaps do a vocational course or something like that, something that will get them a job eventually. But having said that, it's still very difficult for deaf people to find work, just because that hearing people get a bit scared about working with a deaf person. They worry about how they will manage to communicate.
Two years ago, there was a project where I took 6 deaf students to our local university in Leeds to show them round. All the students who helped them round had some deaf awareness, and they were able to have some interaction with the deaf students, and they took them to different areas, to chemistry, to IT, to media, and the students were quite interested, because there is a support for people who are deaf at university. They will get a CSW, a communication support worker, and they'll get a note taker. So they'll have support whilst they're at university. So it's helping them to understand that there are opportunities at university.
To pomeni, da v Angliji imate tudi problem pri zaposlovanju gluhih.
People.
Yes, that's right.
In general.
That's right. Yes. I think deaf people can often feel quite lonely, quite isolated in their workplaces, and again, it just depends on how they cope with written English, with reading and writing English. If somebody can read and write well, then they will have less of a problem. But I think in a similar situation to here, you will have little pockets of deaf businesses, of groups of deaf people who set up their own businesses and work together. And in London, that's what happens. But further out, away from London, it tends to be that deaf people will work in a hearing business, or they'll be the only deaf person in that company.
Sedaj je naš čas še, da bi vam Takuša prosila za vaše misli.
For me, it's been really interesting meeting the students at the school and seeing them in their classes. I'm really impressed at how the students can speak English. Some of the English is excellent. It was wonderful to observe in an English lesson, the students were talking about the book Jane Eyre, and Sharon was talking to one of the students in English about the book. One of the other students was watching the teacher who was signing to a deaf student, so she was getting the visual input, the signing, but hearing the English. It was really interesting way of working, and she, at one point, that student was explaining to the deaf student something about the book. So it's wonderful observing these students having a natural means of communication.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Jullie waren Krishna putovali v Angliju in da še naprej dobro opravljate.
She wished
Thank you.
also.
Thank you.
Thank you.